Welcome everyone who's here with us now and who's watching later on YouTube to our second webinar in our series. The talk today is going to be on Navigator Reports and data literacy. As always, at least with the prior webinar, my name is Hannah Bonville. I am a senior product manager and I work pretty closely with our teachers and students that are implementing. And I'm joined by Dina.
I am Dina. And I am Gooru's Academic Operations Manager. I've been here for almost 2 years now, and I work mostly with content and metadata, but I also help a lot of support.
If you have any questions, you are welcome to sort of unmute yourself and ask them. You can also put them in the chat. I do just want to let you know that all of the webinars are recorded and will be added to our YouTube channel. So just be mindful of that if you unmute. If for whatever reason you don't want your voice out there on YouTube, that's fine. Just pop a question in the chat and we can answer it. The slides will also be posted on our community page, including these active links. So you can see the webinar schedule link is right there. That is active. So you can see what ones we have coming up next. The next one is in about a month. Okay. And we also have admin webinars coming soon. So the rough agenda for today is we're going to actually talk about data literacy by use case. So we'll walk through what you and your students might be doing in class, and we'll pause along the way to talk about different reports that might be useful and ways that you can use the data that those reports have. And as always, we have lots of support resources for you. Again, these are active links, so you can click on them if you access the slides on our web page. It's linked to our community site, our handbook, and our YouTube page, which is where the webinar will be. And as always, you're also welcome to email us at support.
All right. So, as always, much like Hannah said, I'm going to give a brief overview of Navigator and what Navigator does. So Gooru's Navigator functions much like a GPS does. It identifies where the student's starting point is, exactly where they are in the current moment. It plots out a personalized route to their destination, and that destination is typically grade level. And again, much like a GPS, it offers reroutes based off of student struggle or success. So we can see where am I starting and where am I going? How can I get there? And also any reroutes. So before we dive into the meat of this, just want to cover a few types of data in Navigator. So there is a lot of different types of data available, but you don't need to use all of it, just to get that out of the way, first and foremost. We want you to figure out what works best, and all of the reports were designed to be actionable. So with all of this in mind, first I'll talk about qualitative data. So the Gooru design scheme as a whole was built with data in mind. So you'll see all over the site, there are traffic color coding. So green is good, green means go. Yellow means maybe hit the brakes, and red means maybe, well, pause, stop, and check out what's going on. Additionally, we also use orange throughout the design scheme to show a reroute. And then quantitative data that we offer includes scores, time spent, so the active time spent learning, the number of suggestions taken, and the number of competencies or learning standards gained. We also have synchronous data, so that's data that comes from places like class activities, and then asynchronous data, so data that comes from places like the learning journey. So whenever the students are working independently. So today, as Hannah said, we're going to be taking a look at reports by use case. And a friendly reminder that all of the reports update dynamically, so it helps to check them routinely. Just develop a habit, maybe you check it on Fridays, and just remember to always check it on Fridays, and then you'll get greater insights. So for this webinar, we're going to be focusing primarily on the learning journey and the performance overview. So whenever you are looking at your class cards, if you want to access the learning journey, you can click these three lines right here, this icon. Hovering over it will also show you. Or you can click this air traffic controller, which will take you to the performance overview. So just to get this out of the way, I'm going to give a brief vocab refresher, just in terms that are very key to data literacy in Navigator. So first and foremost, competency, which is learning standard. So most lessons are associated with only one learning standard, so they're associated with one competency. Additionally, mastery or gain means that a student scored greater than or equal to 80% on an assessment tagged to a competency. So in every lesson, there's a collection and an assessment. That whole lesson is tagged to one competency. Scoring 80% on that assessment gets you mastery, which then is a gain. Inferred mastery happens if a student decides to skip ahead a bit, maybe to whatever lesson they so choose. We have all of the content broken down into smaller chunks, typically based off of prerequisite topics. So if a student skips ahead to say, I don't know, dividing fractions, then if there are two lessons before that, that's something like setting up fractions for division, they'll get mastery for that. Reinforced mastery occurs when a student remasters a competency they were already proficient in. Time spent is the active learning time in Navigator. One thing that I think is very important to point out is this is the active time learning. So that means the time the student is looking at collections, so interacting with resources, or answering questions and assessments. So if they're looking at a results page, like after they took an assessment, that doesn't count under active time. And then finally, suggestions are pieces of content that are automatically offered by the system, but teachers are also able to assign them if they so choose. So suggested collections are offered by the system if a student demonstrates struggle. So if they're taking an assessment in that lesson and they don't quite get 80%, the system will say, hey, maybe you want to look at this collection of resources just to make sure you have this topic down. And then similarly, if a student does very well, they are offered a suggested assessment, which contains slightly more difficult questions. They increase in depth of knowledge, but if a student scores well on that, they can earn a mastery badge. That's a challenge then. All right, so use case one, your students have logged in for the very first time and they've started to complete their domain-based diagnostics. So I just want to point out that this only applies for Math Navigator at this moment. So Science and ELA, don't worry about this one quite yet. So the diagnostics are automatically presented to the students whenever they begin to work in a new domain. And they're also presented the very first time the student logs into the system. The domain-based diagnostics are adaptive. So if a student is doing well, they'll be offered more difficult questions. If they're not doing so hot, they will be offered a few easier questions, just so we can identify exactly what they know. Each diagnostic contains a maximum of 15 questions. And then additionally, each of those covers one domain at a time. So something like operations and algebraic thinking or functions. So once your students have logged in on day one and you know they've started to take their domain-based diagnostics and you just want to check their progress, you can find your diagnostic report by going to that performance overview page. Hannah will show you a refresher in a moment. But once you're on your performance overview page, you will be able to click on your diagnostic report card right down here. So the Diagnostic reports are accessible from the Performance Overview tab. And in that report, you can view which students have completed which diagnostics, so which domains specifically. Whether the students are testing above, at, or below grade level, you'll be able to see that right on the report. And then where each student will begin their learning journey to fill the gaps identified by domain. So you'll be able to see the exact competency that they're going to be starting on based on the results of that diagnostic. And you can also view each student's responses. So you can click in and see, oh, they got this question, they answered this. And Hannah will show you the diagnostic.
Okay. Just want to make sure that you are able to see my screen.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so as Dina mentioned, this is one of the reports available in Performance Overview. So that is this little icon here. So I'm going to just click on that and take us to the page Dina just showed. So this is basically your data dashboard. It's got almost all of the reports that you'll be using and that we'll be talking about today are here. So if you've used Navigator in the past, this is an upgrade since last year. So it's new for the 2021, 2022 school year, based on teacher feedback. So we've got all the reports consolidated on this page. So Dina indicated on her slide that the diagnostic report is in this little box in the lower right-hand corner. So I'm going to do exactly what she said, and I'm going to click on it. And I'm just going to walk you through essentially what Dina showed. What kinds of information can I get from this, and when would I use this? So your students will get those domain-based diagnostics automatically. So you don't have to assign anything. They are automatically triggered by the system whenever your students begin working in a new domain. So some students might take the expressions and equations diagnostic today because they started working in that domain, and others might not take that until 2 or 3 weeks later. So because all of your students are working on different things and at their own pace, they'll take the diagnostics when they come. So the very first level of information I can see here is who took the diagnostics and which ones did they take. So it's pretty early on in the year. I can see on the left-hand side here that I've got students, at least one, that have taken a diagnostic in 3 domains so far. So I've got numbers and operations base 10, I've got numbers and operations fractions, and then expressions and equations. So I know I have students, at least one student in each of these areas. So that's the highest level of information. I can see, all right, I've got kids that have completed diagnostics here. So if that's enough info for you, then you can absolutely stop here. The next level that I can see, let's say I want to look at numbers and operations in fractions. This, I think, is what you'll probably find most useful. Right off the bat, as soon as your kids take these diagnostics, the reports update. And so you can very quickly see our students testing in that specific domain below, at, or above grade level. So this is an 8th grade class. And I can see that all 4 of the students that I have here that have taken this diagnostic so far, they're all testing below grade level. And actually I can see significantly below grade level. So as 8th graders, their answers on the diagnostic indicated that they actually have gaps as far back as 4th grade numbers and operations fractions. So those lessons that they obviously struggle with are automatically populated into their learning journeys. But for you as the teacher, you can see, wow, it is October and my kids are coming in, all of them are testing below grade level in numbers and operations and fractions. Maybe this is something we need to talk about at our next PLC meeting when I talk to the lower grade math teachers. Maybe we can beef up how they're teaching fractions so I don't end up there next year when the kids come to 8th grade having things like this where I see all of my students are testing below grade level on fractions. Again, if we click, let's just look at another one. We've got expressions and equations. Okay, I only have one student here who's taken that diagnostic. And again, as kids take these tests, they'll populate here. I can see Betty is the student. She is testing below grade level for expressions and equations, and she'll be starting at 6 EE2C. So she's roughly somewhere in the beginning, middle of 6th grade in terms of her precise knowledge of expressions and equations. So the whole objective of the diagnostics is to give you, the teacher, and also the system a much more precise understanding at the domain level where each student should start. So all of that is available to you. And if you are one of our super data users, you can also see the students' individual responses. So we've sort of gone from the highest level of info, what domains have students stepped into, to the medium level of are they testing below grade level and where specifically are they testing. And then if you really want to dig deep, you can see the students' actual responses. So this might come in handy, I'm thinking in particular, if you have students with IEPs or who have quantitative goals that you have to track throughout the year. Maybe this is something you need to check early on. So let's say I've got that situation with Charlie here. I'd like to actually click and see his responses. So we can get this into the IEP as sort of the baseline for the year. And then as things go forward, I can see how he does on these types of questions later in the year so we can see growth. So first thing I'm seeing here is 47 seconds, and I should have been more explicit. All I did was click on see responses. And you just get the little pop-up. So right here, Charlie spent 47 seconds on this diagnostic. So boom, right away, that is concerning to me as their teacher. As Dina mentioned, the diagnostics are anywhere between about 9 to 15 questions. Unless we're pretty much working with our eyes closed, there's no way that that can reasonably take 47 seconds. So this is a piece of data that's useful. It's kind of not something that's surfaced at the same level as what we were just looking at, but it's useful information. I can also see the students' answers. I can actually see the question, the students' answers, and the correct answer. So I can see where the struggle is, what they got right. But again, already seeing that this is a 47-second experience for the student, I'm going to probably assume that most of these are guesses. But you have sort of descending levels of data from domain, where they're testing, all the way down to individual responses. So I'm going to pass it back over to Dina so she can go over, just as a review, some ways to use that information in class.
All right. So there are a few ways you can use this diagnostic information in class. So as Hannah just highlighted, you're able to identify issues with foundational skills. So you can identify things like, are most of your 7th grade students starting at 4th grade? Or what fundamental skills might be lacking? That was highlighted whenever she was showing in the fractions domain, I believe, that most of the students, well, all the students who had taken that diagnostic were starting significantly below grade level. Additionally, you can track year-long progress in a domain. So this situation can occur whenever your 7th grade student, for example, began geometry at 4G2 in October and they reached 7G1 in April. So that's 3 years of geometry growth. So that's super exciting to be able to view. And you're also able to identify outliers and strengths and needs in a given domain. So if the vast majority of your students are doing well in a domain, but you have 1 or 2 that are scoring below grade level, or even just a few competencies below, just a slight outlier, that can highlight that so you can use that data. All right, so use case 2. Your students are working independently on their learning journeys to fill in gaps, and each student is working on a different lesson and at their own pace. So if you recall, the learning journey lists all the milestones and units in your course, and each student's learning journey is completely unique. Sometimes all the students will have access to this. Oh, let me put a disclaimer on that. For math, all of them are completely unique. For science specifically, the students will have access to the same lessons. It depends on which course. However, they are still organized, at least math is organized in this milestone view, where we can see each grade level. And then within each of these grade levels, we'll be able to view the lessons. So the learning journey provides class level data by milestone, unit, and lesson. And it also includes lesson level data, like assessment level data and collection level data. So just from this first glance, we can see this is actually a different view than the one we just saw. The one we just saw was the grade level view. Here we can see that this is a domain view, and Hannah will highlight that for you. But we can see the qualitative data, the traffic light coloring right off the bat. So we can see the scores to the right. And additionally, we can see each lesson and the lesson title. All right, and I'm gonna let Hannah give you the deep dive on the learning journey now.
Awesome. So I am back out as the teacher on my class cards here. So when we were looking at the diagnostics, we were on our performance overview page or tab, which is this little guy here. To look at the learning journey, you're going to click on this little sideways bar graph, which is the learning journey icon. So here we go. The default view for math is this view where you can see grade levels of material. But as Dina indicated, you're always welcome to switch to what we call the course map view, and that breaks things down by unit. So we've got milestones, which is just grade level bands, or if it's more intuitive or helpful for you to see it by units, you can do that too. The qualitative data, meaning that coloring of green means go, yellow means slow it down, and red is a full stop. Let's see what's going on. That is the same no matter what view you have. So I'm just going to come over to our milestone view. And I just switch back and forth by clicking the show course map and then show milestones will bring me right back. So on our milestone view, again, this is my 8th grade math class. Right at this level, I can see super high level information that might be useful. And this is a 30-second check. I logged in, I clicked, I can see right off the bat, my kids, which again, 8th graders, thankfully were in green, which means their average scores for 2nd and 3rd grade material is above 80%. Whew, that's a relief. 4th, 5th, and 6th grade material, we're averaging somewhere in the 70s, so not awful, not great. And then I can see that there's a little more struggle in 7th and 8th grade. So at the highest level, that's useful information. I can rest assured I probably don't need to reteach 2nd and 3rd grade concepts at the class level. Good to know. It also indicates to me that I should take a bit of a closer look at what's going on in 7th and 8th grade material, since that's where our scores are the lowest. And it actually pretty much goes from high to low, which is expected. You know, the 8th grade students, they do better on that older, simpler material. And then as things get more recent and more complicated, the scores go down a bit. So let's actually dig in and take a closer look. My eye is drawn to this darker orange, thinking we're approaching red. We are approaching really having a serious problem. So let's take a look at what might actually be going on here. So I'm going to click into grade 7. And as a reminder, what you see next to each band here is the whole entire grade level's worth of material average among all students. So it's a super high level aggregate piece of data. It's still useful, but it's also worth digging into because there might be some things like we see here. Some mediocre scores and then some really icky scores that need to have a closer look, occasionally some strong scores. So again, it's useful at the milestone level, but I think it's worth digging in to see what's actually going on in the actual lesson. So we've got our grade level. And then as I clicked on this, I can now see every single lesson available to my students in this grade level of math. So it goes all the way from solving problems involving scale drawings through expressions and equations, all the way into probability. So let's actually stay up here and look at our 7th grade, this first lesson. Maybe this is a really highly tested subject. I know we all have the state tests to worry about, and I know we all know, whether it's published or not, what the most commonly tested standards are. So maybe this is one of the super commonly tested standards in my state. And I want to see, okay, we're averaging 70%, but what's really going on here? So all I need to do to get more information is actually click on the lesson, and I can get a little bit more info as to what's going on. So I can see this is a cumulative value, total time spent by 23 students on this lesson. So they have gone through some resources and some videos to get acquainted with the material. And then I can see again that I've got 23 students took an assessment covering this material, and the average score is a 70%. So I'm going to leave that bit of information here. And before I pass it back over to Dina, just to review what we have on this page, we've got all the material available to your students, regardless of the course that you're teaching, from top to bottom. And you can see qualitatively by the colors that are used here, where the average assessment scores are above 80, between 60 and 80, and then below 60, meaning needing your attention. Clicking in just allows you to view individual lessons, and then clicking in further once more allows you to view individual activities within a lesson. So I'm going to pass it back to Dina, and I promise we'll come back to this page and actually dig in further.
Won't be too long. All right, so just quickly, I want to talk about a few ways you can use the information that Hannah just highlighted for us. So you can, at a glance, using the traffic light colorings, identify the lessons or assignments that your class is struggling with. You can also tell, is it most of your students? So that can give you an indicator of whether or not you should maybe reteach that lesson. Or is it just a few students, and can you provide a more targeted approach? Maybe something like small group work. You're also able to quickly check the average time spent on the collections. So you're able to see things like, is it a really short amount of time? Because if so, that might be the origin of the struggle. Also, if it's a very large amount of time, maybe there's something funny going on. You can also quickly verify that the students are doing well on early milestones, which Hannah showed you. At the very top of the milestone view, you'll see the earliest grades in material. So you can just quickly, at a glance, see green, good, and know you're good to go. All right, let's dive into use case 3. You've asked your students to complete a particular lesson in the learning journeys on a topic recently taught in class. You plan to use this as a formative assessment. So to do this, we'll need to take a closer look at the assessment level data in the learning journey. So if you assigned a specific lesson, you will have to find that lesson in the learning journey, and then you'll click. I just tried to click it, force of habit, muscle memory. You will click to expand to see the collection and assessment. And then to see the assessment level data, we're going to end up clicking over here in this orange box. But I'll let Hannah get into the nitty-gritty of that.
Okay, so full disclosure, this is my favorite use case. So the one we covered prior to this was all my kids are working independently, filling in their gaps at their own pace. So I have some kids working on 3rd grade stuff, some kids working on 8th grade stuff. Now with use case 3, the one we're talking about now, that's when you direct your students to work on the same lesson. So everybody, I know your learning journeys look different, but for the next 20 minutes in class, I'd like you to find the lesson called No Rational and Irrational Numbers and work on that. So it's usually your grade level of material, something you've just taught in class, and you want to use what's in Navigator essentially as a formative assessment. So let's imagine I did that. So I just taught my 8th graders rational and irrational numbers. I gave them 20 minutes after my instruction, 20 minutes to work in Navigator on this specific lesson. So all of my kids are working on this exact lesson. So just like we did before, I can see here my average score, the students on average scored a 61%, and I can see 15 students have completed this so far. So 61% is concerning to me. I just taught this in class, not 2 minutes ago. I just taught this. So I obviously need to dig in here and figure out what is going on. I just taught it and we're averaging a 61%. So just like we did before, to get more info, you just need to click on the lesson. So again, I can see I've got my cumulative time that's rather short, and I've got my average score 61 and the number of kids. So this is essentially how far we've come. Now I get to show you my favorite reports. So I want to know more. Who scored well? Who didn't score well? Who do I have to reteach rational and irrational numbers to tomorrow? To get that information, just like we've been doing, you just need to click. So to see how the kids did on the lesson on average, I clicked on it. To see how they answered on this assessment in more detail, I'm just going to click on it. So the very first thing I can see here is I've got a list of all the students that have taken this assessment. By default, it's alphabetical, but I can sort by score. So by default, again, it's sorted by last name, but if I click average score, it sorts it from high to low score for me. So it just made my groups for me. It just made my small groups. So I can see right away the 6 students that have mastered this concept, they get it. I don't have to reteach them. I can see I've got 1 student sort of riding the middle, and then I've got a whole handful here that are very much struggling with this concept. So right off the bat, just clicking on this average score button, this sort by score, allows me to identify who I don't need to reteach and who I can pull aside as a small group during tomorrow's lesson to go back over this for 15 or 20 minutes. It also lets me know if I want to form a couple of small groups. Maybe I put 3 of the students that are in red here in a group together, and I plop 2 of these students that are in green with them. So I have my higher scoring students in a small group with my lower scoring students so they can actually collectively help each other. So because this is my favorite, and I really do think it's useful, I would like to just show you one more time how I got here. So I assigned my students this lesson to complete in class. I'm using it as a formative assessment. I just taught it, and I want to see how well they really understand. This score is concerning. I want to know more, so I click, and then I can click on the score. And all I did was just click average score, and it sorts it by the average score. So that is one bit of information. It just gives me my groups right away. The next bit of information that you can see, and again, if this is too much, then don't use it. Just find the amount of data that's most useful for you and stick with it. The next bit that I can see here is actually each question on that assessment and how students did. So question 1, question 2, 3, 4, all the way through question, I think 6. So when I see that my students averaged a 61% on rational and irrational numbers that I truly just taught them in class, my first thought is, oh God, I have kids that don't know the difference between rational and irrational numbers. I have to start from the beginning with them. But if I look here, I actually can see question 1, which is what type of number is, and I click on it, pi. So what type of number is pi? So I can see actually all students got that right. So I don't actually have to teach what kind of number is pi. I've got another question 2, what type of number is, so that differentiation between rational and irrational. Everybody got that right too. So even my kids that struggle can tell the difference between rational and irrational. I start to see some struggle on question 3, but what I really notice is question 4 is universally wrong among students that didn't master this. So question 4 is rewriting, I mean, again, I can just click on it to read it, is rewriting a decimal as a simplified fraction. So it seems like they get the difference between rational and irrational. Where we start to have problems is when I need them to rewrite one as the other, rewrite a fraction as a decimal, and vice versa. So you have the information to make groups just at the level of the assessment, who got it, who didn't get it. Cool, you can absolutely stop there. If you want to dig further to see what do I actually have to go back and readdress with my struggling students, you can check the questions. So I know now, thank goodness, I don't have to reteach this group, even though they struggled. I don't have to reteach them how to tell rational, irrational numbers apart. Clearly, from these data, all I need to really focus on with them is how to convert between one and the other. So again, as far down as you want to drill, you can. I get super excited about that report because I think it will be super, super useful. And I'm going to pass it back to Dina so she can just summarize how that is used.
All righty. So there are quite a few ways you can use the information. So much like you just saw, you can see the student scores for an assessment. So you can do that to check a specific student score, or you could do it to sort the whole class into groups and identifies those that might need more help, a little bit more assistance, and also separate out those that are succeeding. Maybe pair them together and see if they can help each other. You can also use it to identify which specific questions are causing struggle throughout the class. You can identify trends and use that. All right, and we're going to dive into use case 4. So you want to quickly see how your students are doing relative to each other and to grade level standards. So, as Hannah showed us a little bit ago, the performance overview is our data dashboard. And the most obvious feature the first time you click onto this, or anytime you click onto it truly, is this big graph in the middle. And this is incredibly useful for identifying students relative to each other and also to grade level. So from here, we can see on the y-axis, the performance. So their overall performance from grade, well, for all materials. We can also see the number of competencies they've mastered. And if we choose, we can click onto this show grade grid, which will then show us the students' position relative to each other and also where the closest grade level that they are to. So we can see who's scoring really well and also who is getting really far along in their learning journey. They're almost their destination. And we can also see who's a little bit farther behind in their learning journey. All right. Now, just quickly into use case 5. So you've set a weekly goal for your students. So something like 2 competencies gained per week or 45 minutes of time spent, something along those lines. And then you decided on Fridays, you will assign a participation grade to all the students based on whether or not they met this goal. So this is super easy to check. We will be back at the performance overview page. And then we're going to click into this class progress report, which we can see right here. So we can see on this card, the average performance score, the average number of competencies gained per student, and the average number of competencies in progress per student. But we're not too worried about that right now. We just want to know, did our students meet those goals? So we're going to click into the class progress report. And I will let Hannah do the actual clicking.
Okay, so I'm back out here just to show you again. We're going to go to our performance overview page, which is like the little radar symbol. So I have clicked on that. And remember, our diagnostic report is in the lower right. Dina just talked about this big old graph here. But what we're interested in for this use case, where you've set a goal for your kids, everyone just needs to gain 2 competencies per week. That is our goal. To check on that, we need our class progress report. So that is right here. You can click on this box to get to your class progress report. This is probably, even though I got really excited about the one we talked about where you can sort the kids, this is probably going to be your most used report, if I had to guess. So just to show you one more time, I'm on my performance overview page. I click on class progress report. It brings me right here. So I'm just going to set the date range to all time, just so we have some data to look at. But if you're checking weekly, you can just pick a specific week. So you can limit the report to 1 week at a time. It doesn't have to be Sunday to Saturday. You can actually set a specific date range where you pick, like, let's say last Wednesday and this Wednesday. I check my data every Wednesday and I give my kids their participation grades based on that. So just for our sake, I'm going to click all time just so we have some numbers. So let's say my goal for my students is 2 competencies gained per week. Again, gaining means getting an 80% or better, like really mastering that skill or concept. So all you need to do is pick your date range for the week and just run your eyes down this column. If I set the goal at 2 competency gains per student, there should be a 2 in this column for every child. If the students have that, they get their participation points. If they don't, then they don't. It truly can be as simple as you setting the goal with your kids and then checking on a routine basis, like every Wednesday, every Friday, whatever you pick, and just run your eyes down. So if I set my goal for 2 per student this week, real quick scan, we're all good. Everybody is at 2 at least. So every single student, I can put their participation points in my grade system, in whatever grading system you use. Done. You can totally stop there. If you set, instead of a competency gain, if you want your goal to be more about time spent actively learning on the Navigator course, let's say I said our goal is 45 minutes a week. So from Wednesday to Wednesday, you need to have spent 45 minutes on your Navigator course. Again, I can set my date and I can super quick run my eyes down this list. Are we at 45 minutes? If we are, great, everybody gets their points. Perfect, done. So you have all types of additional info, but this can be a quick process. I know most of you watching have a lot of students. And so you don't have necessarily a lot of time to really dig around in what each individual student is doing. So if what you have time for is to quickly see, did my students meet their goal? Do they get their points? Just run your eyes down the column, check for that numerical goal that you set. There's also some terms here that we should just touch on. Dina mentioned these, and again, the slides will be available, so you have that as a reference. Gaining is probably what you'll be most interested in. That's the mastery, really showing evidence of proficiency in a skill or on a standard by scoring 80% or better on that assessment. Reinforced is mastering something that you have already shown that you're proficient in. So let's say a student has shown that they're proficient in, I'm trying to think for my science people here, they're proficient in organelles, cell organelles. If they keep on taking that assessment over and over and over and over and over and mastering it every time, it'll just appear as a reinforced mastery. So they can't essentially artificially inflate their gains. You gain it one time. You show evidence of that first initial mastery, I get it, once. And then if you keep mastering something you've already shown proficiency in, it'll just appear as reinforcement right here. And then inferred, like Dina mentioned, is if a student jumps ahead before they work on some of the prerequisite lessons, but they actually do really well on that sort of far ahead lesson, the system will infer, well, if you mastered dividing fractions, you probably already know the difference between a numerator and a denominator. So even though you didn't prove you mastered that, the system will infer it. So that's what this is here. But again, my guess is that you'll be most interested in or most frequently checking the gains column. So yeah, we've got an average score, so I can also see in all the work students are doing their average score. These are those challenge assessments, which are optional, and they're offered to students after they do well on something, the system will say, hey, you want to try something a little harder? The student can say, sure, I'll do it, or no, thanks, I'm good. If they do it and they do well on it, it just shows up here. So I can see Jose did that 15 times. So he did well on an assessment and accepted a challenge 15 times. So that's at the class level. If you need a report for your principal to show that your kids are using Navigator, you can download and print it just by clicking this little guy over here. It's downloadable as CSV or PDF. So that gives you your whole class report. What you can also do is click in a bit farther, as always, if you want more info. So let's say I have Camille Francis. Her parents are coming in today for conference, and I need to show evidence of how Camille has been doing in math. So to get student-specific info, of course, I have her row in this class level sheet, but I kind of want to know, well, she's mastered in 14 lessons. What lessons were they? Her average scores is 63%, but what were her scores on each of those assessments? So to get more info, just like we've been doing all along, just click. So I want more info on Camille, I'm going to click on her name. And that opens up an individual student report. So again, by default, I see class level. To get student level, I just click on the student. And this report is also downloadable in this exact form. So here I can see over whatever date range I set, specifically what Camille has mastered, what Camille is kind of struggling with, and what Camille is really significantly struggling with. I can see the description of the competency. So it took her 2 tries, but she scored an 80% on the Pythagorean theorem lesson on June 22nd. So it gives you a whole bunch of info in that little line. So I can see clearly, and I can show this, I can just slide it across the table to Camille's parents or guardians, whoever shows up for the conference. Here's how Camille has been doing in math over the date range that we're talking about. You can see where she's been successful, where there's been a little bit of struggle here, and things that we probably need to address in class, and then areas of more significant concern that we need to really formulate a pretty concerted effort to address. So all of that is available at the class level, and then of course by clicking on a student, you can get individual student level info. So Dina will just review that, and then we'll make our way into use case 6.
All right. So quick overview of ways you can use your class progress report. So you can use it as a weekly check to see if your students are meeting pre-established goals. So that could be something like the 45 minutes spent that Hannah used, or also like the 2 competencies gained a week. You can also use this to assign a participation grade to reinforce the student's habit building. You are able to download and print the overview reports for each individual student, so you can send those home with progress reports if you want. And much like she just showed you towards the end of that demo, you can click into an individual student or on an individual student to view a detailed report. So you can download and report that for one-on-ones with students, parents, and conferences, all sorts of things. And I do want to note that individual student report that you view from that portal is actually the same student report that your student sees. All right, so use case 6. Even with their personalized learning journeys, you'd like to see if any students are lagging far behind or very far ahead. So you want to identify some outliers. All right, so in order to do this, we're going to, once again, be on the performance overview page, and we're going to be accessing the data by milestone report this time. And I will let Hannah take it away.
Okay, so just to sort of recap where we've been on this page, we've talked about our graph, we have checked out our diagnostic reports, we just saw our class progress reports, and now we're actually going to focus in on this milestone report. So let's say for this use case, I don't really have a lot of time to be looking at reports this this week. I just don't. It's the first 9 weeks. I don't have that much time. I just need to identify really quickly, is anybody lagging? So one way you can do that, again, on your performance overview page, is to click on the milestone report. So just like we did for the class progress and the diagnostic, you just need to click on the box. So data by milestone. So what I can see here is a breakdown by milestone or grade level. So I can see at each grade level's worth of material, who's done some work, how far have they gotten, how much have they mastered in their score. What I'd really like to show you, again, let's imagine I'm sure it's a stretch to imagine we're short on time. So let's imagine that you're a teacher who doesn't have a lot of time. And I just need to see who is lagging. Is there anybody I really need to pay close attention to? Let's take ourselves right to this final row here, class journey report. This shows me where all of my students are. So I can see most of my kids are working in 8th grade material. I can see how many competencies they've mastered. Again, that's how many lessons they've scored 80% or better. And notice each student's denominator is different. That's totally expected. If you think all the way back to the beginning of this webinar, to the diagnostics, when we talked about those students testing below grade level, the system, Navigator, responds by adding in additional lessons for them to fill in those gaps. So if a student has a whole bunch of additional lessons added, of course, the denominator for this fraction is going to be larger. So I can see, for example, Jose has 91 lessons in his learning journey, whereas Peter has 179. It's totally normal that the denominators are different. And the numerator shows me how many of those they've mastered so far. I can also see their average score. So back again, as I ramble on, back again to that idea of I don't have a lot of time. I need to see if anyone's super far behind. I've clicked on the class journey report and I can see where all my kids are. So most of my kids are 8th grade. I've got a couple in 6th grade. That looks fine. Boom, right here. Just check the rest of the list. 8th grade, 7th grade, right here. That is significantly behind the rest of the students. So I don't think I've got anybody working on anything less than 6th grade. And then I've got one student that is still working on 4th grade measurement and data. I can see a little bit more info here. The student has mastered 6 competencies, so the pace is quite a bit behind the other students as well. And the average score is also concerning. So the average score on all the students' attempts is 11%. So super high level, if I need to pick out my sort of high flyers, who needs my attention on this quick scan, boom, Domenico needs my attention in terms of we need to set up a real concerted plan about how to address whatever is going on in math that is causing this degree of struggle to show. So the milestone report is there for you if you just need a super high level bit of info to figure out who do I focus my attention on.
All right. So to recap, sorry, there are a few ways to use your milestone report. So you can use it to quickly determine which specific milestones are causing struggle. So you can use this to identify, is there a foundational concept that students quite aren't grasping? Maybe something back like in 4th grade measurement and data. And you can also use the class milestone report to see where each student is in their learning journey. So you can see how many competencies they've mastered, and in addition to the denominator, which is the whole number of competencies in their learning journey. So you can see, are there outliers? And you can also see which students are working successfully on more advanced topics. You can also help identify that, so you can have them maybe help their peers. All right. So use case 7. You want to identify particular competencies that are causing issues for multiple students. And you also want to address those issues in a targeted way, just for the students that need it and just for a particular lesson. So much like in all of the other use cases we've shown you, or the vast majority, you can find this on the performance overview page. So this time we're going to be looking at opportunities for growth. So I'll give a surface level explanation of it and let Hannah get into the nitty gritty of it. So for opportunities for growth, you are able to see the domain and then a competency and then a description. So what this is a single lesson where you have students struggling. You can see the number of students right here. So what this is showing me is that I have 15 students that tried to master something in geometry in HG3, but they didn't master it. So they need some support. So this is where the opportunities for growth comes in. I'll let Hannah take that away.
Alrighty, so we are back on our performance overview tab again, and we are now going to look at this box here as Dina showed. So just exactly like Dina said, this lists out for me, so I don't have to sort of dig through anything. It highlights right away, where are my students struggling? And it's actually sorted according to sort of most students struggling to least. So I'm an 8th grade teacher, remember. So this is a good opportunity for me to just quickly scroll through and find, are there any 8th grade standards in here where I've got struggle going on? So I can see, boom, there's one here. This effective dilations. I've got 15 of my kids tried that lesson and did not complete it successfully. So they did not score 80% or better. Yikes. I can see another 8th grade standard here, knowing and applying properties, et cetera, et cetera. I can click on it if I want to. I've got 14 kids struggling there. So I can super quickly see the domain and the competency where I've got struggle, as well as the number of kids. So I can stop here if I want to. If I just want to see, oh my gosh, I've got 15 kids struggling on dilations, huge pause. We have to just, maybe I'll put it on an exit ticket. I can pop a couple extra questions on the homework about it, just to sort of spiral it back in, because clearly my kids are struggling. Sorry, I'm click happy. So as always, this is sort of a theme now. If you want more information, it's there. And all you need to do again is just click. So specifically, who's struggling and how bad is the struggle? Because if we're talking like 70%, I'm probably going to let it slide. I have a whole bunch of other curriculum that I need to go over. But if we're talking like 20s and zeros, then this is something I need to address pretty quickly. So I'm going to actually dig in and see who's struggling and how severe the struggle is. So click, and I get my information. So I can see who my students are that have attempted and not mastered, and I can see the score. So I've got a decent amount of 60s, but there are way too many 20s and 40s in there for me to be comfortable just letting this go. So I can stop here as well and just acknowledge these are the students that need this particular topic readdressed. I can stop here if I want to. There's one additional step that is there if you want to take it, and it's related to this little orange compass icon. So the whole idea of the compass is that everybody sometimes needs a reroute. Everybody veers off track sometimes, and you just need a little bit of a reroute to get yourself back on track. So anytime you see this orange compass icon on your teacher page, anywhere you see it, it's an opportunity for you to help your students get back on track. And the way that happens is by making a suggestion. So you are essentially identifying where they veered off track, and you have the ability to suggest support resources to them to get them back on their route. So I'm going to just pop back in here and we'll take a closer look at this dilation concern. So again, it's my standard HE3. I've got 15 kids that are struggling. The struggle is too severe for me to let it go. So I'm just going to scroll down a bit in orange here. I can see some suggestions that are available for me to make. So it's divided up into 2 categories: collections, which is resources like videos and simulations and uploads and things like that. And then assessments are assessments. It's more practice questions that would produce a quantitative data point for your students. So you can assign one or both. I'm just going to focus on collections for now. So I've got 15 kids struggling. I think what they're in need of at the moment is not more questions, but actually some more support resources. So I'm going to stick with collections. There's a bunch of options available here. So we'll just say this is the one I want to use. I can see a brief description. By clicking this little play button here, I can actually preview it. Let's imagine that I've done that and I think it's fine. To assign it or make that suggestion to my students, again, it's the little orange compass. I'm just going to click. The system's going to ask me, hey, just want to make sure you want to make this suggestion. And it's to just those 15 students. So that's kind of the beauty of this, is that you're targeting your support. And it's pretty not as labor intensive as I'm sure we all have done in terms of figuring out who needs help and how to do it. So all I did was just click on the struggle, pick the resource I want to support my kids, and then I can automatically just assign it to those specific kids. So all, like my 5 or 6 kids that understand this concept aren't going to get the suggestion, just the ones that need it. So I'm going to click confirm, and that suggestion will appear on the student's page as a notification. Done. So I do want to mention before I turn it back over to Dina that suggestions are one of several examples in the Navigator system of student agency. So just like the way students can navigate their learning journey according to their own pace and their own gaps that they're filling in, there's nothing closed off to them. The same idea is true and it holds here. Students have agency to say, no, thank you, I don't want to take that suggestion right now. So they'll see it as a notification and they can say, no, thanks, I'm good. They can say, yes, I'll take it. And that'll show up on your report as a suggestion taken. But they also have the ability to say, no, I'm good for now. As a positive, suggestions that students don't take don't actually disappear. They're stored on the student's page until students access them. So they are viewable until students take those suggestions. One final note is that on the student page, which is a subject of another webinar, on the student side, taking suggestions is shown as a victory or something to celebrate. So it's really promoting the growth mindset with students. The system shouts them out for, hey, you took 4 suggestions this week, great job. So again, all I did was click on the little human avatar, saw who was struggling, picked a support resource, and clicked to assign it. Boom, the support resources are sent out to all those specific kids that need it. And I can come back in and check this periodically since it updates as my kids work.
All right. I will give a very quick recap of making suggestions, and then we will conclude the webinar. So, even the best drivers need to be rerouted sometimes. The exact same thing is true for students. So, as we just saw, each suggestion is related to one specific competency, which in turn is related to one specific lesson. And Gooru will automatically make a suggestion to the students when struggle is demonstrated. And much like Hannah highlighted, the students have complete agency, so they don't have to take the suggestion, but the system will store it indefinitely. So it's always there if they want it later. And it also, again, as she noted, the growth mindset is heavily promoted through the taking of suggestions. So the students get those shout outs and it gives them that little bit of dopamine. They're like, maybe I'll take more suggestions. But yes. I think that concludes this bit. Hannah, do you have any final notes?
No. Thank you all for being here with us. And to those of you watching on YouTube, thank you so much. If you came in late, I just want to remind you that this webinar will be posted to our YouTube page and the slides will be posted on our community site. All the links in the slide deck are active. And it includes a bunch of support resources and ways you can contact us if you need help with anything. But happy data digging. And yeah, I'll just toss it to Dina to see if there's anything before we wrap all the way up.
No, I don't believe so. I
Awesome.
realized, okay, all right. On that note,
Bye.
bye.